Chad Thomas from the IRS Forensic Investigations. Chad, good afternoon and welcome to Salam Media.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me and wishing everybody well over the fast.
No, thank you very much, Chad, and we hope that this month also does bring some sense of peace, as we understand very well. Last week we was discussing on the issue of the CIT bombings, and we saw the one, I think it was on Thursday, where there were about 3 bombings that took place in one day, and obviously just spreading it across that crime is getting out of hand in South Africa altogether. Now, on this point, then, Chad, we've seen also a pattern recently. Whenever crime spikes in hotspots like Westbury or the Cape Flats, or even when the Zamazamas become a headline, the immediate cry from the public is bring in the army. Is this a sign that our SAPS service has officially failed in its mandate, or what is the case?
I wouldn't say they've completely failed. If they'd completely failed, we'd be in a failed state position where we wouldn't have come out of a national election cycle, be going into a local election cycle, having an independent media, independent judiciary, a fiercely independent democracy. But we're close. Crime is unabated in this country, and when one looks at the comparison between South Africa and other emerging economies, our crime rate soars far beyond other countries. It's just not acceptable. When it comes to the deployment of the military, if you'd asked me this question exactly 20 years ago, in 2006, I would have said that the deployment of the military is a great resource, simply because we had military that was trained in what we call territorial forces. They were trained to combat crime in certain areas in conjunction with the police, and they were known as the commandos. The SANDF commando structures were created to protect rural, peri-urban, and urban areas. And they worked very successfully. And for reasons known only to Thabo Mbeki, he decided in 2006 to disband the commando structures. We now have conventionally trained soldiers. The SANDF are trained conventionally. That means they're trained to fight a conventional war. There's a small element within them that are known as FABUR, which stands for fighting in built-up areas, known as urban warfare. But the word warfare is what we need to concentrate on. Soldiers are not trained the same as police. Police are meant to be peacekeepers, hence title peace officers, whereas soldiers are meant to fight a war. Soldiers aren't there to take prisoners. Soldiers are there to gain territory. So as it stands right now, our military deployment, if they have to be in support of the South African Police Service, need to have some kind of training. And that's going to take time. They can't be deployed immediately. The sad part is if you combine our entire SANDF with our entire South African Police Service, it's still only half of our security industry. The security industry have been acting as force multipliers. It's a security industry that the SAPS need to formalize more public-private partnerships with. But the SANDF, given the correct training, would definitely be able to facilitate more assistance and resources towards crime fighting in terms of search and cordon, but not in terms of investigating crime, which is our biggest deficit at the moment, and in terms of crime intelligence.
No, 100%. And as you just mentioned, correct, that obviously the soldiers are trained for combat and to neutralize enemies, and also to gain territory. Then, on that point, then what are the specific risks when we put a soldier on a street corner in a residential neighborhood?
A soldier fired upon carries an R4 rifle. It's an assault rifle. It's a rifle that's used in times of war. And although the police are issued with a very similar rifle, the R5, they know how to return fire in such a way that it's from a defensive perspective. Well, most of the police, if you're in KZN, those KZN police operate completely differently, and they operate more as a paramilitary force. But be that it may, you're putting a soldier into a urban situation, and you're going to expect him to take fire and not respond in terms of his training. You're looking for a firefight that's going to cause havoc. Already we've got gangsters where they've got civilians caught up in crossfire. Imagine military personnel using their weaponry and their training in a built-up area. It's a frightening scenario. However, that being said, the military can relieve the SAPs of the responsibility of having to watch their back. In other words, if the military are deployed in such a way that they protect the perimeter, in other words, if you're going to saturate an area with SAPs for search and seizure, and to neutralize and disrupt and dismantle syndicates, you would normally have the police protecting that perimeter and then and other police going in to do the actual search and seizure. With the military being responsible for that perimeter, the police have now got more members to go in and search, and they don't have to worry about their back because they're now being covered and secured by those military members. But that's a thin line to draw, because now the military are also going to be getting involved in the search and seizure. The military are going to be wanting to involve in more of the civilian aspects of policing. And where does it cross over? Where are they entitled to cross over? Remember, they are not peace officers. They are soldiers. They don't have the same powers as SAPs. So it's a very interesting dynamic that needs to be addressed. But any support that the police can have in terms of force multipliers will go a long way in fighting crime.
No, most definitely, most definitely. And also, another issue that we look at, Chad, is that now we often hear that, as you also mentioned this point, that gang violence and illegal mining are symptoms of deeper issues, whether it may be unemployment, substance abuse, and other defining issues or social issues. Now, is it right for us then to expect the army to play the role of the social development Department of Social Development, or should we be looking at other ways and solutions to deal with this?
So I don't expect military to be playing that role. That's the role of DSD, but we don't have enough social workers in South Africa. We've heard talk that they wanted to deploy social workers to every station in the Republic, and I think that's a very good opportunity for us to be able to enhance what we call community policing. We also have what are called auxiliary social workers that work under supervision of social workers that can also be deployed to assist, because when it comes to ABV and other social related, you don't have those people that have been trained at police level. Police officers is trained to a very limited extent on how to deal with victims, whereas social workers and auxiliary social workers can provide a huge difference in terms of victim impact studies and victim impact statements, and assisting victims in getting their cases to court and helping those victims through that very torrid process. But the military can't play that role. The military are there as force multipliers. The military are there to ensure that the police's back is protected, but we can never take the role of the police away from the police. Just like we've seen the security companies in terms of the E2 project acting as force multipliers, the military are going to do much the same. But also the military create this perception, which is a good thing, of a very strong armed force. You look at their camouflage uniforms, you look at their hard-bodied vehicles, and it creates a perception that these are dangerous people. Let's not mess around while they're here. And that takes me to the next point, and this is something you raised at the beginning of the insert. We tend to saturate areas where crime has occurred, and that crime will then stop temporarily, move to another area, and when those resources are redeployed to the new area, the crime then re-emerges in the area where the police and military had been deployed. What does that mean? It simply means that we don't have enough police and we don't have enough soldiers to be able to effectively police the entire country. What they're doing is the Band-Aid approach. They're going into areas where there's problems, they're saturating those areas, and all the problem does is move. And when the police and the army move to that next part, it comes back to where it was. So we need to address this as a long-term problem. And the only way we can address this as a long-term problem is to make sure people stay behind bars, which means our detective services have to be effective, and that we know who the bad people are, which means our crime intelligence has to be capacitated. Those are the two areas that are lacking. Throwing the army and throwing security companies in support of the police will never resolve the issue until we hold people to account and until they see consequences for their criminal actions.
And anyone to that, Chad, then would it also be a point for us now to see a specialized Scorpion style type of a unit back to deal with such issues then?
Look, that's what IDEC's meant to be doing in terms of corruption and high-profile cases. That's the whole purpose IDEC was created after Zondo. We had the ID, which came into effect, and ID is now morphed into IDEC. We've also got the Hawks, which purportedly replaced the Scorpions. Now, one thing people need to remember, and this is a critical thing for them to understand, is the Scorpions may have been good at what they did, but they were a very small unit that punched above their weight for one reason and one reason only. They got to cherry pick their cases. So, of course, their success rate was phenomenal. You couldn't walk into a Scorpion station and open a docket. There was no such thing. If anybody that's listening to us now can tell me where they saw an office that said the Scorpions or the Director of Special Operations, I'll give them a reward, because we didn't even know where they were operating from. They got to cherry pick their cases, and that's why they were so successful. The Hawks don't get to cherry pick their cases. They get cases referred to them because their mandate is to investigate certain priority crimes. So they have no choice. They have to investigate whatever's given to them, and they're only sitting at about 50% capacity. So their success rate is nowhere near what the Scorpion success rate will be. IDAC, very similar to the Scorpions, gets to cherry pick their cases, so they're going to have a phenomenal success rate as well. But when you look at the crimes that are affecting us as civilians, and you look at the actual success rate, it differs significantly to what you'll be told by the NPA. The prosecutors will tell you that of enrolled cases, they have a great success in murder, they have a great success in rape. But those are cases that they've determined to enroll. They're also cherry picking, and rightfully so. They're only enrolling cases where they believe there's a prospect of a successful prosecution. So they're not going to enroll a case that hasn't been investigated properly. So when you look at the amount of cases actually reported versus those cases resulting in a conviction, that's where the statistics get scary. 10 to 12% of murder cases are solved in South Africa, and 5% of rape cases are solved in South Africa. That is frightening. What does it mean? Poor detective work. If there's poor detective work, no prosecutor will enroll that docket. There's not enough space to enroll a docket of which they don't have a prospect of successful prosecution. Why is it that we have bad detective work? It's not because we have bad detectives. Our detectives have too many cases and too little resources.
Oh, most definitely. These are, again, the figures and the statistics are very concerning, and we hope that the solutions, as you mentioned before, come quicker than we expected, because, I mean, this is just one of the main things that makes South Africa a livable country, whereby we are hopeful that the future will be better. Chad, thank you very much once again, and we really wish that these points that you've raised are going to be heard in the higher ups in a proper settings, and so that can leave us with a better times. And also, like right now, as it is the month of Ramadan with us, our community, we hope to see calmer and peaceful nights as well. But thank you very much, Chad, for your time, and we really hope the best, inshallah.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity.
All right, cheers.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to 5:15, and we'll be taking a quick break. After the break, we'll be joined by Attorney Bashir Park, inshallah ta'ala, as we look at the Abu Zaid initiatives and how Dawah is going with them, inshallah.